got Mike Schaefer joining us from Husker 24/7. Schaefer, what's going on, man?
Not a ton. How we doing today?
How we doing, bud? We doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing quite well. We'll just not have to talk about that Sunday night fiasco and move on to feeling incredibly nervous about Monday night, and then the season ends, and you got 2 losses to the Rams and 2 losses to the Lions, and you won 14 games, and that'll be great.
If you look at the bright side, though, then that only means there's 2 teams in the league that are better than you. So that's not bad.
Something like that.
I'm not going to dwell on the Vikings, but I do have one. I do have kind of one thing. Do you feel like if they either would have ran the ball a little more or caught the ball better early, that they could have helped Darnold get off the schneid?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think he was particularly helped by a lot of things on that game on Sunday night. He didn't play well, so you got to start with that. Like, he's the one throwing the ball high. At the same time, the interior of the offensive line got its butts kicked in a way that, quarterbacks pressure up the middle kills quarterbacks more than anything else. And if you go back and you watch that game, all of the stunts, all of the stuff that they're doing with the interior defensive line, the linebackers, and where they're bringing all of that pressure, it's almost always up the middle, because Minnesota's offensive line is worse up the middle than they are on the edge. And they really got to Darnold that way. And then Jefferson normally catches that touchdown pass. TJ Hawkinson alligator armed the 3rd and 17 because I think he remembered getting his knee blown out by the same dirty Lions defense the year before. They didn't play well. Like, the whole team did not play well. The defense, I think, did as well as you could expect for 3.5 quarters. Who knows what happens if Van Ginkel picks off another screen pass for his 3rd interception return for a touchdown this year. He nearly had that one. But, yeah, I think they needed to give Sam Darnold some help. I think they could have used Aaron Jones in the red zone inside the 10-yard line a little bit more. I think they could have done a few things, but they played tight. They look like a team that played tight. I think they're a lot better than that team. And if they go handle the Rams, maybe they get another opportunity at the Lions again. The bigger concern I have is that game flow, the way your defense played. I don't know that you're going to get that again, and you didn't take advantage of it. I mean, they had a chance to really jump on the Lions, and they didn't do it. And I just don't know if you're going to get that again. But that's why they play the game, so we'll see how that goes.
Shafe, we're just starting to preview Nebraska, Iowa tonight, and I got a couple buddies. One he's similar to yourself. He's all in on almost every Nebraska sport there is, but in particular, basketball. Doesn't love the matchup. I'm trying to convince him otherwise. We were reading some of the stats, right? You saw Ben Stevens' tweet yesterday that even got Caleb's attention at the dinner table yesterday, talking about Nebraska basketball turnaround. I asked Ravi earlier, are you confident enough? And you're a fan, so you're perfect to ask. Are you confident enough where you could forecast this Nebraska team in terms of, well, they should do this or they can do this without the fear of like the old Charlie Brown trick?
No, I don't know that anyone is quite confident enough or should be quite confident enough where you're forecasting. And I think the Big Ten is tough enough where forecasting is kind of a fool.
It's apparently drunk early on. It is.
I mean, it is a tough conference. Like, you don't get off nights. You don't get to just like cruise into a game, put up 70 points, and you're going to get a win because you're playing the Big Ten of 2017 or whatever it is. I mean, it's just a different conference. I think every game is kind of going to be its own challenge. But what I like about this team and why I think that maybe compared to last year, where I think they were significantly better offensively overall, but I felt like they had to sort of have a certain game flow last year. I think this team can adjust a little bit differently. We'll find out. You're going to play an Iowa team that's going to score. Even when you play really good defense, they're going to score. Can Nebraska score with them? I think they can, because Iowa doesn't play great defense. I think they have ways that they can attack you. It comes down to or ways that Nebraska can attack them. It comes down to being able to make open shots. Connor Essegian had multiple open shots on Saturday, didn't make. Other Nebraska players had open shots they didn't make. So, if Iowa's defense is allowing you to shoot 60% from the field, you're going to go have success. So it's a matter of, can they adjust to the different game flow? And I do feel like this team, more than last year's, is capable of doing that. I don't necessarily think that this is a better team than last year. I just think that the way that they are built allows them to play in a different style of Big Ten game and maybe be comfortable in more rock fights than last year's team without the rim protection, without the rebounding. It's just a different style, different build. I honestly think we haven't given Fred Hoiberg enough credit for how good he is doing as a coach, for his adjustment from where he was at and what he wanted this to be, to how he has sort of adjusted to the assistant coaches that he's hired, to the players that he's pulled out of the portal. Go back to early November and how people talked about this team, and then how people are talking about it now, how people talked about an Andrew Morgan and what his value is to him now. So if anything, I have a lot of trust in that coaching staff that they're going to be able to get those guys ready to go. And they got a lot of guys that are just sort of junkyard players. Like, they don't, I think they have the personality of Juwan Gary, where they don't really care how it looks, and they just are excited to scrap and fight. And I think it's a big part of how they're going to be carried this year. And I think it's why they're going to be more successful than we would have maybe guessed at the beginning of the year.
I guess so. And I asked the question just because Coach Hoiberg is trending in this staff since February 1, right? The 71% win percentage. Well, and as you kind of alluded to, there's still the trepidation to say, well, hey, over the next 4, they got to go 2-2. Like, we do that in football all the time, right? I mean, these next 4, but we're very reluctant in basketball, even though, we have a year's worth of data, and it's pretty consistent. And Schaefer, this year, you have so many guys that don't have to shoulder the load. You don't need. I mean, we just watched Essegian and Brice go 2 of 18 combined, and UCLA wasn't in that game the final 6-7 minutes. You didn't feel, right? So sometimes it's Morgan as the glue guy. Sometimes it's Hoiberg. Sometimes it's Gary. But they're always consistent in the ability to defend. And yet we're kind of still reluctant, even though it sounds like, even in your just description, what you're getting with this basketball team.
Well, I think you know what you're getting, but it's also because you can't trust the level of offensive play. It's really hard in a conference like this to just be like, yeah, you're going to rip off 3 out of the next 4 if you don't know if they have the ability to get to 75 points or not. That's
that's what makes Iowa tricky, right? Because even though they're leaky,
I think Iowa's a tough matchup coming off of a win like this, and we saw the exact same thing. Nebraska beat the number 1 team. I'm almost sure of this. They beat the number 1 team in the country last year in Purdue. Had to go on the road to play Iowa. Couldn't score. Couldn't make open threes. Lost the game. I think Nebraska should be able to win tonight. I think if you were going to pick which of these teams has a better chance of being successful on balance in the entirety of a season, I think it's Nebraska. In a 1-game scenario on the road for a team that hasn't played a lot of road games and doesn't play on the road particularly well, because playing on the road in the Big Ten is really hard, it's hard to project for me that they're going to win. I think this is a fascinating game because I think it's going to tell you a lot about the heart of that team, and it's going to test that theory that I have that they're versatile. It wouldn't shock me at all if they go and score a bunch of points tonight, because Iowa doesn't play great defense. And I think Fred Hoiberg can coach offense really well. He's just got a defensive first team at the moment, partly because of what they are. Also, before I forget, the Connor Essegian plus 20 while being 0 of 6 from the floor is just an amazing stat.
It is.
That is truly amazing. He played good defense for a guy who didn't contribute.
Who's offline defensively.
He jumped multiple passes. He did well.
Can we stop for a second?
Oh boy.
Oh, sorry, Creighton guy's upset.
No, because I'm actually going to use the Creighton guy as an example here as to why the plus 20 is sometimes a little bit of a misnomer. Plus minus in a single game sample size can be very misleading.
Understood.
This happened with Mason Miller, who I don't think has been playing particularly well for Creighton, and he was plus 15 the other night without doing literally anything. I don't think he had 1 rebound the entire game, right?
I think if you put on the tape of the UCLA game and just watch Essegian on defense, it wouldn't be literally anything.
I understand Essegian was playing well. the plus 20. I get a little bit bristled up about single game plus minuses. Schaefer, that's
fair enough.
You hit a sensitive spot there for me on single game plus minuses.
Schaefer, I'm gonna take advantage of the fact you got strong opinions. Always. It is. We went through this deal anecdotally about comparing playoff expansion to basketball and why it's kind of a bad example. And Ravi did this super deep dive into like 6 seeds and lower and not versus non-blue bloods making runs, and it's an amazingly low percentage. We talk about UCLA as like this fictitious thing where, number one, I'm not necessarily are they a blue blood, but when you look at like UCLA and under Cronin and kind of how his teams just historically can't score, like how do you view UCLA as a program?
I mean, I can't speak for how everyone else does, and I'm going to go to the sort of the emotional side of this. Like, it was a big deal to me to see UCLA playing on Nebraska's court on Saturday, obviously in the context of a conference game. But when you grow up watching Nebraska basketball, and when you watch all of these non-conference matchups, and when Nebraska gets their draw for the Big Ten ACC Challenge, and it's the same Clemson, Georgia Tech, Florida State, Boston College, Virginia Tech, Miami, and you never get to see like the good teams come to Lincoln. Growing up, like UCLA won one of the first national titles of my life. Like I remember them winning that national title.
95.
UCLA has been in the Final Four. UCLA has played for championships. You can name great collegiate players that became great NBA players. They were just recently one of the more fun stories when they made their run from Dayton to the Final Four, losing on the Suggs, half quarter against Gonzaga. And so, like UCLA is just a name brand team for me in basketball, and so to get to see that in Lincoln, which the only other real times have been, and they're all conference games, but it's been Kansas, kind of Indiana, Michigan State is a name brand team. Like it is a cool deal to me. I don't know how everybody else perceives it because UCLA basketball has been sort of, below the rung of a lot of the other kind of great blue blood teams, but it's still a jersey that you just never expected to see playing in Lincoln, Nebraska. So for them to be there, to be a ranked team and to get a win, like it's a huge deal. I get that Mick Cronin and his style doesn't reflect what you think of UCLA basketball necessarily. But I mean, they were just recently a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Like this is not a program where it's like a fly by night operation. Like I think Mick Cronin's a good coach. I just think stylistically you're getting Cincinnati basketball in a UCLA uniform. Like that's hard for people.
I was hoping if I were you, Schaefer, if I could have just been like doing your strings and kind of being a ventriloquist, I would have been like, that Mason Miller reference is so spot on, even though it's not, because we heard Coach Mack say, Schaefer, that because they chose to guard Mason Miller like a shooter, it opened up so much space on the floor. Conversely, the way they stayed attached to Essegian, and I mean literally attached, allowed Nebraska more space on the floor. Like, those things matter, even though they don't show up statistically in the stat sheet. That's what I would say.
Well, I have a tough time separating Mason Miller, the Creighton basketball player, with the only good player on the A's in the pitching. So that's part of the problem.
An hour of him,
I love that. Mason Miller.
Every time that comes up, I'm just thinking of Pitching Ninja on Twitter right now. So I've got that going, but I actually thought what UCLA did in their perimeter defense against Brice Williams in particular, like he looked as uncomfortable as he's going to get, which I still think is the key to how you can slow down Nebraska if you play him. If you play tight man defense on Brice Williams, he's going to pass the ball.
I would put it on the so I'm with you. I wish he would put it on the deck just a little more.
I think that's the shortcoming of his, like, this is where when I tell people I want him to have 10% more Turan Petaway, that's kind of what I mean. You're late in the shot clock. There's 6 seconds left, and you just toss it to Raleigh Wooster with 1:30 left in the game, and then the ball ends up in Hoiberg. Yeah, the ball ends up in Hoiberg's hands in the corner with half a second left. Like, that's not what I want from Brice Williams. Like I kind of need that guy of a minute and a half left. Game's still in the balance. You got to put that on the floor. You got to get to the hole. You got to try to force contact. You got to do something. Like that's your game. That's your basketball. I didn't love that.
Are you surprised, or is it about right that Iowa's just a 4-point? I say just. It seems like a pretty snug line that just a 4-point fave.
I think that's probably in line. You know, like it's the thing that's always sort of precarious about this is Nebraska doesn't tend to lose by just 4 if they're going to Iowa. Like it's, you know, like when they lose to Iowa at Iowa, it is a large number generally.